What's happening, guys? Welcome in another boxing breakdown and prediction show for this weekend's light heavyweight unification clash between the Irish bomber himself, Joe Smith Jr., and current transnational champion and Ring Magazine #2, Artur Beterbiev, live over on ESPN Plus this Saturday night, direct from New York. So let's get into it now. Despite this being a legitimate kind of best versus best type matchup in this division, no matter how you have these two guys ranked, both are legitimately in the top three in this weight class, along with Dmitry Bivol. And the odds for this fight are surprisingly wide. Artur Beterbiev comes into this one as the prohibitive -800 favorite. And, while I can make somewhat of a case as to why that may be. I think Artur Beterbiev's assistant trainer, John Scully, kind of said it best when he said that, basically everything Joe Smith Jr. does well in there, his power, his relentlessness, his kind of will to win. Beterbiev has all of those traits, plus a whole lot more on top. He's got better footwork than Smith. He's got a much better inside game than Smith as well. But despite all that, -800 is far too wide for me, as those odds suggest an almost 89% chance of victory for Beterbiev in this one, which, is frankly ridiculous in my opinion. I have nowhere near that high of a percentage, although I would make Beterbiev the favourite, obviously, as, Beterbiev's never been in there with someone with as much relentless power as Smith possesses. So I have to take a piece of Joe Smith Jr. here by KO, especially because these odds are just too big. I actually believe Smith's greatest weapon in this one will be his simplicity. Simplicity is arguably underrated in boxing. If you do something well, stick to it. Refine it, obviously. Don't look to do an Anthony Joshua and try and outbox a master boxer in there. And, we just saw a very simple plan play out to fruition at the weekend with Daniel Dubois overpowering Trevor Bryan over in Miami. I thought Shane McGuigan has done an excellent job so far with Dubois. Obviously, still some things to work on, like his timing and so on. But, it was refreshing to see Dubois, just get back to what he's good at in there. There was no coy tricks like he was trying to do against Joe Joyce that first time, trying to slip under Joyce's jab and work away on the inside. This was just straight and utter destruction from range. And, that's something arguably that Smith's got to do in this fight as well, as, he won't be able to outbox Beterbiev over 12 rounds, in my opinion. Beterbiev is the much better boxer of the two from a technical standpoint. I don't think, Beterbiev gets enough credit for his skills in there either. People automatically focus on that power. But, Beterbiev's very good at slipping in and out of range, especially against sharp, long distance type of opponents like Alexander Gvozdyk and Marcus Brown. And, against the guy is fairly rudimentary as Joe Smith is. Smith's attack patterns are fairly straightforward in there. He looks to kind of shuffle forward, deliver those power hooks of his. And, he's got a great overhand right as well, which he can time opponents with. But, nonetheless, Beterbiev with those quicker moving feet, with that ability, with his ability as well to slip in and out of range and take advantage of Smith's tendency to leave his head stationary as well after throwing punches. That's another very dangerous tendency that Smith has against a guy like Beterbiev. So I do think Beterbiev will be able to find a ton of success in this one against Smith. The other danger here, obviously, for Smith is that this fight is a mismatch at short range. Maxim Vlasov was finding a ton of success up close against Smith in their fight. He was slipping, he was countering, he was pivoting off to the side. I had Vlasov in that fight as well as a fairly big underdog. I thought he'd done enough to win that fight against Joe Smith Jr. So I was a bit salty after the decision was read out and it went to Smith. But, again, at short range, Joe Smith is going to suffer in this one against Beterbiev. Beterbiev has that, Joshua Buatsi type of inside game where he can pin down your most effective weapon. He can create angles, create space, and break open that guard. And the scary thing about Beterbiev is that, he can generate immense power from very little as well. He doesn't need those hips to kind of force through hard punches. Simply throwing them from up top oftentimes has enough power for him to close the show. And he has an absolutely monster uppercut as well. So, if Smith gets caught up against the ropes here, he's in real danger of getting broken down by Beterbiev. So, he needs to keep this fight at center ring, for as much as humanly possible. Saying all that, I know it doesn't sound like I'm too high on Joe Smith with, the technical breakdown there, but a plus 2,800 on Smith by KO over the first half of the fight. Don't get me wrong, Beterbiev has quality slip counters. He is a high level technical boxer as well, but he's no Floyd Mayweather, certainly, and he can be clipped. He can be hurt in fights as well. He's guilty of lunging in sometimes against opponents. When he looks to close the distance, he leaves himself very open to huge counters when doing so. Also, Gvozdyk, his most high level opponent to date, was almost too scared to capitalize on that fact in their fight. They had some amateur history prior to that fight, but that fear factor certainly won't affect Joe Smith Jr. this weekend. And Beterbiev's focus on protecting himself upstairs as well, as opposed to the body, leaves himself very vulnerable downstairs to heavy-handed punchers like Joe Smith. So, against a guy as all-round heavy-handed as Joe Smith Jr. is, those defensive deficiencies for Beterbiev could be a recipe for disaster here, especially at 37 years of age as well. We've already seen Beterbiev go down against Jeff Page earlier in his career. He went down hard against Callum Johnson a couple of years ago as well. He was really hurt by that shot, staggered over the neutral corner. And, Smith arguably cracks even harder than Johnson does. So, that Callum Johnson performance could well be key here for Joe Smith, in my opinion. Johnson wasn't going into that fight looking to try and win a decision against Beterbiev. He just iced Frank Buglioni over in London inside a round. Johnson knew he carried a ton of power as well. And, he looked to put it on Beterbiev from the opening bell. And it very nearly paid off for him. So I'm sure Jerry, Capobianco will be telling Joe Smith Jr. something similar ahead of this fight, as well. Don't be coy. Don't go in there and try and outsmart yourself against a better boxer than you. Simply use those talents, God gave you, and go in on a seek and destroy mission against this guy. Look for that KO. Is the one aspect in this fight that Joe Smith can certainly match Beterbiev in is power. And he has to use it, as, in my opinion, I don't think Smith has any other avenue to victory in this fight. I like the plus 900 on the Joe Smith Jr. by KO simply on its own. I think that's a very big price. But, I'm expecting this one to be an absolute banger from the get-go on Saturday night, as do the bookies, obviously, with an over-under line of 8.5 rounds. So that Joe Smith to get the stoppage between rounds 1 to 6 is going off at an absolutely mammoth plus 2,800 this weekend. And I have to take a piece of that at those odds. And, I'll probably look to cover myself marginally with Beterbiev to get the stoppage between round 7 to 12 at even money, as well as, if Smith can't close the show early here, he'll very likely get broken down and stopped late by Beterbiev, as he starts to grow into the fight. So for the purpose of the show, however, the main play in this fight will be Joe Smith Jr. to get the job done between round 1 to 6 at an absolutely mammoth plus 2,800 price tag. Simply can't pass up those kind of odds. And, it's go big or go home, as Mary Grande used to say. So that's what we'll be on for this weekend. So that's going to do it for me. That'll wrap things up for this episode. As always, leave us your thoughts in the comment section below. You can catch me over on Twitter at the SportsWolf83 and at my handicapper page, Kevin Dolan, over at WagerTalk. As always, thanks for listening. Until next time, slán